A raven is handed a small tool. It is the only object in the room that can open a puzzle box holding a piece of dried meat. The raven uses it, gets the meat, and the tool is taken away. Time passes. Somewhere between 1 hour and 17, the raven is shown that same tool again, lying next to a treat it could eat immediately, no tool required. The puzzle box itself is nowhere in sight. The raven leaves the immediate treat alone. It picks up the tool instead, and holds onto it. When the box finally reappears, sometimes most of a day after the bird last saw it, the raven uses the tool correctly, on the first attempt. That is not a trained response to a cue sitting in front of it. That is a choice made now, for a problem the bird cannot currently see, held across a gap of time long enough that most animal cognition experiments never bother testing it. No one rewarded the raven for holding onto the tool during those hours. Nothing in the room told it the box was coming back at all. This is where the idea that problem solving is a uniquely human trick starts to fall apart. This episode is about what a problem-solving brain actually has to do, and about a growing list of species, separated from you by an entirely different kind of brain, that turn out to do it anyway. Start with that raven and the tool. In 2017, the researchers Kabadayi and Osvath published a study in the journal Science asking whether ravens could plan for events that had nothing to do with the one thing corvids were already known for, hoarding food. Caching had a ready explanation available. A bird hiding seeds for winter might simply be running a specialized, food-only instinct, not general foresight, and that loophole had let researchers set corvid caching aside as a special case rather than proof of anything broader. So Kabadayi and Osvath built two different tasks, neither involving caching or food storage of any kind, to close that loophole directly. In the first, ravens learned that a specific tool opened a box containing food. Later, with the box no longer in view, they were offered that same tool again, alongside a treat they could eat immediately, no tool required, across delays reaching 17 hours. With a human experimenter for a better reward, and were then tested on whether they would hold onto that object, again passing up a smaller reward available right now, in order to make the trade later. On both tasks, the ravens chose the future. They kept the useful tool over the option to eat now. They passed up a smaller treat for a better one they could not collect yet. Their behavior even tracked how far off that future moment was, not just whether one was coming at all. The researchers wrote that raven performance on these tasks parallels what has been seen in great apes, and that the result suggests planning evolved independently in corvids. Ravens are not apes. The two lineages do not share this ability because they inherited it from a common ancestor. They each built it, separately. This was not the first time a raven had made that kind of case, only the most rigorous. In 1995, the biologist Heinrich ran a simpler but no less telling experiment. He gave ravens a problem none of them had ever encountered before, a piece of meat hanging on a string, beak, stepping on that loop to hold the gain, releasing the beak, reaching down for the next loop, and repeating the whole sequence 6 to 8 times in that exact order until the meat finally came within reach. Heinrich's own question, stated directly in his paper, was whether the birds could demonstrate that solution without first practicing or learning the correct sequence of steps. The answers varied from bird to bird, and Heinrich reported that honestly rather than picking his best case. Some birds approached nervously and gave up. Some yanked at the string a few times and quit entirely. And at least one wild raven, with no other bird demonstrating the technique first, performed the entire multi-step sequence correctly on its very first attempt. Not a fragment of the solution. The whole thing, first try, no rehearsal. The variation itself turned out to be informative. Hand-reared ravens, used to people and easily startled, dropped the meat the instant they were shooed from the perch, from the very first trial. The other birds did the opposite, trying to fly off with the dangling food when they were handed it, and it took them somewhere between 5 and 9 trials to stop, apparently learning the consequence. And when Heinrich changed the puzzle itself, crossing the strings, swapping in new string variants, moving the perch somewhere unfamiliar, the ravens kept solving it without falling back into blind trial and error. Whatever was doing this work was not tied to one exact setup memorized by rote. Ravens were not the only corvid making this kind of claim. In 2007, the researchers Taylor, Hunt, Holzhaider, and Gray tested new Caledonian crows on a different puzzle, one that required a tool to retrieve a tool. A short stick could not reach the meat directly. It could, however, extract a longer stick from somewhere the crow could not otherwise reach, and that longer stick could then reach the meat. 7 crows were tested. 4 of them retrieved the meat on their very first attempt, with no opportunity to have learned the sequence in advance. The researchers concluded the crows had not solved the puzzle through trial and error during the test itself, and had not been relying on some previously learned rule either. Their explanation was that the crows were reasoning by analogy, carrying a solution shape over from one kind of problem to a new one they had never faced before. A raven holding a plan for the better part of a day. A raven solving a multi-step string puzzle in one try. A crow retrieving a tool with a tool on the first attempt. Different research teams, different decades, different corvid species. The pattern running through all 3 is identical, a brain solving a problem it has never faced, without the benefit of practice. Here is the part that should stop you. Ravens and crows are birds. Their brain is not built the way yours is. There is no cortex arranged in stacked layers doing most of the thinking, the way there is in you. Their forebrain is a different kind of tissue, organized in dense clusters rather than sheets, sitting on a branch that split away from the one leading to mammals hundreds of millions of years ago. There was no shared blueprint sitting around to copy. And yet a specific region of that different tissue, called the nidopallium quadrilateral, does something that should not be possible if intelligence required one particular kind of hardware. Researchers who study it describe it as not the same structure as your prefrontal cortex, not handed down from any shared ancestor, while noting that it serves comparable functions anyway. It is, functionally, doing your prefrontal cortex's job, the planning, the holding of a delayed goal, the choosing of later over now, that you just watched a raven perform. Different materials entirely. The same assignment. This is exactly what the researchers Nathan Emery and Nicola Clayton pointed to when they reviewed corvid cognition alongside great ape cognition and proposed that complex cognition rests on a specific toolkit: causal reasoning, behavioral flexibility, imagination, and the ability to plan ahead. Corvids and great apes share the toolkit, they argued, despite having vastly different brain structures, because complex cognitive abilities can evolve more than once in distantly related animals solving similar problems in their environment. Not a single blueprint, copied once and inherited. Multiple, independent answers to the same design problem. A pause here, because it matters. None of this tells us what it feels like, if it feels like anything at all, to be a raven holding a plan across 17 hours, or a crow reaching for a tool it has never needed before. Heinrich called what he observed insight, a word borrowed from a much older argument in psychology, one that began with chimpanzees in the early 20th century appearing to solve problems by suddenly reorganizing the pieces in front of them rather than groping toward an answer through blind trial and error. Heinrich imported that same word for a bird, deliberately, because the pattern of behavior looked the same. That word describes a pattern in behavior, a correct solution appears. Not a claim about what the raven experienced while doing it. Nobody watching from outside has access to that, not Heinrich, not Kabadayi and Osvath, not anyone since. What we do have access to is your side of this. You have had a version of this exact experience. A problem you could not talk yourself through step by step, and then, later, a finished solution simply arriving, assembled somewhere you were not consciously watching. Chess players describe this. Programmers from a hard problem and had the answer surface, unbidden, on a walk or in the shower, already knows what this feels like from the inside. You have also held a plan across a gap where nobody could see it working, saving something good for a day that had not arrived yet, or turning down a smaller reward now because you already knew a better one was coming. That is not a metaphor for what the raven does. It is the same category of computation, running on hardware that took an entirely different evolutionary road to get there. The old brain has more than one blueprint. This particular one is sitting in a skull with no cortex at all, and it is still doing the job. Here is the question for the comments. Think of the last time a solution arrived complete, without you building it step by step in front of your own eyes. What was the problem, and how long had you been sitting with it? And in the next episode, we ask a harder question than whether an animal can plan for a future event. We ask whether some of them plan for the one future event that none of us can act on at all. That one starts with a chimpanzee mother who would not put her dead infant down for almost a month.